Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a moment that literally redrew the global map. We're going to look at the incredibly complex chain of events, the bitter personal rivalries, and honestly, the highly calculated British policies that all crashed together to cause the 1947 Partition of India. Because, this isn't just a story about drawing lines on a piece of paper. It's a really profound look at how human ego and backstage political maneuvering can completely alter the destinies of millions of people. So let's just get right into it. We're starting with a pretty startling quote. I am Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Because of me, the partition happened. History tells us that if you really want to understand the partition, you've got to understand the personal transformation of this one guy. Jinnah is essentially the anchor of our whole story here. Later on, he famously secured 75 crore rupees for the newly formed Pakistan, fighting through some immense political pushback. But how did he actually get to the point of demanding a completely separate nation? Well, to figure that out, we have to rewind the clock a bit. Section 1, the Ambassador of Unity from London to Bombay. So back in the 1890s, a young man from a wealthy Khoja Muslim family, a community that, centuries earlier, had actually converted from Hinduism to Islam, traveled over to London to study law. And the man who came back to Bombay in 1896? He was completely transformed. He was this staunch secularist, a real English gentleman who, honestly, valued his law books and sharp suits way more than any religious rituals. This early version of Jinnah absolutely idealized the moderate Indian leader Gopal Krishna Gokhale. He stood firmly with the Indian National Congress, heavily championing the idea of one united nation. In fact, he fiercely opposed the newly formed Muslim League and their communal politics. His dedication to unity was so rock-solid that the poet and politician Sarojini Naidu actually crowned him the ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity.
Section 2, British divided rule, sowing the seeds of separation.
So what changed? Well, while Indian leaders were busy trying to build bridges, the British Empire was literally drafting blueprints to blow them up. The British knew their survival in India basically depended on breaking up this emerging Hindu-Muslim alliance, and they went about it very systematically. Step 1. In 1905, Lord Curzon partitions Bengal. He cleverly splits it into Hindu-majority and Muslim-majority areas, all under the very convenient guise of administrative efficiency. Step 2. Fast forward to 1906, and the British are actively encouraging the formation of the Muslim League in Dhaka, basically setting them up as a political shield against the Congress. And then Step 3. The real knockout blow in 1909. They introduced separate electorates, meaning only Muslims could vote for Muslim candidates. The big takeaway here? The British were meticulously engineering an us versus them political landscape. They took religion and they turned it into a weapon for administrative control. Section 3. A clash of visions. The turning point. Now, the stage was perfectly set for division, but the final, fatal fracture actually came from right inside the independence movement itself. The turning point really hits in 1915, when Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi returns from South Africa. And if you compare these two men, you instantly understand their rivalry. On one side, you have Jinnah. He's a senior, highly successful lawyer. His arena is the drawing room. His weapons are strictly legal arguments and constitutional debates. On the flip side, you have Gandhi, who comes in and just completely upends the game. He pulls politics out of the drawing rooms and drops it right into the dusty streets. He's organizing these massive movements fueled by deep religious and emotional appeals. And Jinnah? Jinnah was absolutely terrified of this. He firmly believed Gandhi's brand of crowd politics wouldn't lead to democracy, but straight to absolute anarchy. Because of this massive ideological rift, Jinnah ends up quitting the Congress in 1920. Fast forward to the 1930s, and things start escalating fast. After being politically marginalized over in London for a bit, Jinnah returns. He realizes that for Muslims to survive politically, he has to become their sole voice. After the 1935 Government of India Act, we get these pivotal elections in 1937. Congress wins huge, a massive victory. But, and this is a critical but, intoxicated by this win, they flat out refuse to share power with the Muslim League. This arrogance turns out to be a fatal miscalculation. It completely ignites Jinnah's worst fear, a permanent Hindu Raj where Muslims would just never have a voice. And right there, his transformation is complete. The guy who used to be the ambassador of unity now fully embraces the two-nation theory, which leads directly to the 1940 Lahore Resolution. That's the exact moment they formally demand a completely separate Pakistan. Unfortunately, those theoretical demands turned into a horrifying reality pretty quickly. In 1946, the British send over a cabinet mission with a power-sharing plan, trying to keep India united. And get this, both sides actually agreed at first. It looked like it might work. But then a massive misstep happens. Jawaharlal Nehru casually mentions in a press conference that the proposed grouping system could be altered down the line. Jinnah felt completely betrayed. He was now totally convinced Congress was just going to use its majority to crush Muslim autonomy later on. So he withdraws his support entirely and issues this chilling call for direct action on August 16, 1946. He basically says if constitutional paths fail, Pakistan will be taken by force. And the result? Over 5,000 people were slaughtered in the streets of Calcutta in just 72 hours. That violence in Calcutta set off this horrific chain reaction of riots all across Bihar and Punjab. An interim government was set up, but it was basically paralyzed. Liaquat Ali Khan, acting as the finance minister, blocked almost every single decision Nehru tried to push through. The country was quite literally descending into civil war, in every single neighborhood and every government office. This forced leaders who desperately wanted unity to face a very grim reality. Sardar Patel captured this heartbreaking realization perfectly when he said that if there is rot in one limb, it must be amputated to save the whole body. I mean, even Gandhi, who had famously sworn that partition would only happen over his dead body, was forced into this silent, tragic acceptance while the country burned. Section 4. Drawing the Radcliffe Line, the rushed border. With the decision finally made, all focus shifted to the sheer, terrifying logistics of tearing a country in two. In March 1947, Lord Mountbatten arrives as the very last viceroy. He takes one look at the rapidly spreading poison of communal violence and makes a frantic, fateful call. He moved the date of independence up by 10 full months, locking it in for August 15, 1947. Why? Mainly so British troops could pack up and escape the impending chaos. And that brings us to a number that is, frankly, just hard to wrap your head around. 5 weeks. That is the exact amount of time given to Cyril Radcliffe to draw the new borders. Radcliffe was a British lawyer who had literally never set foot in India before, yet he was tasked with carving up the unimaginably complex geographies of Punjab and Bengal. Locked in a room, relying on outdated maps and old census data, he drew lines that arbitrarily sliced right through ancestral homes, farms, and entire communities. And the division wasn't just geographical. It was this incredibly meticulous and ultimately tragic division of everyday life. As the clock was ticking down, bureaucrats were literally splitting the physical assets of a nation right down the middle. We're talking counting out desks and chairs. They divided typewriters. They tore apart library collections book by book. They even split up military regiments based strictly on the religious makeup. It was, quite simply, an absurd bureaucratic nightmare, masking an absolute human catastrophe. Section 5. The tragic aftermath. The human cost. This leads us right into the grim reality of what happened next. When August 15th finally arrived, millions of people were out there celebrating their freedom, but they didn't even know which country they were actually standing in, because the Radcliffe Line, the actual physical border, wasn't even publicly announced until August 17th. And the scale of the fallout, it's staggering. 1.5 crore. That is 15 million individuals violently displaced from their homes. Imagine that. People who had lived side by side for generations were suddenly told, hey, you're on the wrong side of an invisible line. Overnight, lifelong neighbors were transformed into bloodthirsty enemies, driven by sheer terror and intense political manipulation. The human cost here is honestly almost impossible to articulate. Somewhere between 10 to 20 lakh people, up to 2 million souls lost their lives in the slaughter that followed. And the absolute darkest depths of this tragedy? That was witnessed on the refugee trains. Carriages would pull into stations completely silent. They were filled not with hopeful passengers migrating to start a new life, but with massacred bodies. The perpetrators would leave these horrific messages scrawled in blood on the outside of the trains, calling them presents for the other side. Just unthinkable cruelty. And even after the borders were drawn and the dust began to settle, the animosity kept going, bleeding right into the financial realm. Pakistan was owed 75 crore rupees, which was about 17.5% of the central treasury. Now, after making an initial payment, Sardar Patel actually halted the remaining 55 crore. He cited security concerns, which makes sense given the ongoing hostilities, but it actually took Mahatma Gandhi threatening to fast unto death to force that final payment through. Gandhi was just desperate to maintain some tiny semblance of peace and ensure Pakistan actually received its legal due.
And as these two brand new nations stumbled forward, there was a massive secret being kept hidden from the entire world. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the very driving force behind Pakistan, was dying. He had terminal tuberculosis, but he kept it entirely under wraps, absolutely terrified that if the British or the Congress found out, they'd simply stall the whole process until he died, which would effectively kill the dream of Pakistan. He ended up passing away just a year later in September 1948. And tragically, without his leadership, the nation he had originally envisioned as this secular haven quickly slipped into decades of severe political instability. So, we've covered the history, the timelines, and the frankly staggering numbers today. And the ultimate takeaway from this explainer is this. The 1947 partition was a massive administrative failure and a profound human catastrophe, born out of arrogance, colonial manipulation, and deep-seated fear. It leaves us with a pretty haunting question to chew on. When politics is viewed purely through the lens of religion and ego, maps might be drawn. But does humanity always lose? Thank you so much for exploring this vital piece of history with me today. Keep asking questions, and as always, keep learning.